RMC is supported by MonsterJoysticks.com. Level up your retro gaming with their joysticks featuring genuine Sanwa arcade parts. And OneClickPrint.com for your photos on canvas, acrylic, gifts and more. Local craftsmen and global delivery.
Hello cave dwellers, welcome to the cave. Donations, pickups, call it what you like. It's been a long time since we made a video like this, and longer term viewers will remember that we have done 3 or 4 of these before, a long time ago. Before we were in this studio, I used to clear away my sofa and my chairs and try and make my lounge look as much like a studio as possible and show you the things that you guys had generously sent in. Now, there are a few reasons why I stopped making those videos, and none of them were because I was any less appreciative of you sending things in. I guess I just didn't feel like I was being original. There are plenty of unboxing videos out there, but I saw a pile recently just sort of growing and growing in the corner of the cave and thought I'd put it to you guys. I put a poll out there on my community page on YouTube, and amazingly over 3,000 of you responded, which really caught me by surprise. And overwhelmingly, over 80% of you said this is what you want to see. So here it is, back again. I've also taken on board your feedback that you left in the comments. Namely, you don't want this to be too frequent. You only want it to happen when there's enough good stuff to show you, and that's absolutely fine with me. You also wanted facts and information, not just things coming out of boxes. So I'll do a little bit of research beforehand, and I'll also sprinkle in with that research my own personal memories as and when I have them with the items that we're pulling out. Sometimes I'll have absolutely no experience with them whatsoever, and I'll share that with you also. I'm also acutely aware that I'm in a very privileged position where you guys send me stuff in, and that doesn't happen for most of you at home, which is why I think it's important that I include things that I've bought and paid for. Not everything, just things which I think are bargains, because it's getting more and more expensive to follow this retro hobby of ours. And I think it's important for me to highlight that there are still bargains out there. Bargains like these, which we'll get to shortly. But let's go over to the lab and we'll see some of the things that you've been sending in. Now, I can tell you straight off the bat that you're going to get something of a British microcomputer history lesson today. These donations seem to flow really nicely one to the other to the other. So it all starts with the oldest one here. And I have opened this one already. I just sealed it back up for safekeeping to keep everything together. So I know what's in here. It's come from Matt Bowden at 2 Red 7s Limited. So thank you very much for that, Matt. And look at this Sinclair ZX81 kit. So Sir Clive Sinclair with his Sinclair ZX81 here. It looks like we've got 2. Let's have a look inside the boxes. Inside this one, yep, we've got a Sinclair ZX81. Almost like a pregnant calculator look about it. Let's see what we've got in the other one. Very generous indeed if we've got 2, and indeed we have 2 ZX81s. I don't know the status of these. I don't know if at all they work, but they're interesting little machines. They're the successor to the ZX80, the ZX80 coming out in 1980. And for many people, this would have been a really low-cost entry into personal computing. Exactly how much this cost, I can't remember. I'll put it on the screen there now. There we go. Cheap, I'm sure. And that's because there were no less than, 4 chips. Just 4 chips in here, 1 moving part which was to do with the RF, and that's it. It's a very different approach to design than we saw in, say, the Apple II, the TRS-80 with their lovely keyboards over in the US. This was all about being as cheap as possible. The case design was by a designer called Rick Dickinson, who did also continue to work with Sinclair, and we'll see some more of his designs as we go through the donations today. What do you think of the design there? Is that doing it for you? Because it did it for us, apparently. This was before I got into computing. I was certainly on this planet, but it was before I got into computing. And apparently the case design won a British Design Council Award in 1981. So the British Design Council certainly liked the look of it. And it does have a kind of a nice futuristic feel about it. When you consider we're moving on from the beige and the wood grain of the 1970s, this would have looked quite futuristic and quite sleek at the time. Inside you would have had a Z80 CPU running at 3.5 megahertz and just 1K of RAM. So that's why it was so important to get things like this. This is a 16K RAM pack, a whole 16K for your ZX 80 and 81, so it was compatible with the older version. I hope it's in here. Oh, we've got some paperwork in there as well. What have we got here? instructions for use and a memory test program where you're simply poking data into the memory to test it. But there it is, and these were famous, these RAM packs, because they slot on there. Let's slot this one on. And they were famous for what was known as RAM pack wobble. As soon as that started to wobble, you could lose whatever you were doing. The whole thing could reset, whether it was your mum slamming the door, whether it was the dog running past it, whatever. If that wobbled, you were in trouble. So there are all sorts of inventive ways of taping that on and keeping that on to prevent the famous RAM wham. Listening to Wham, getting your RAM pack wobble. And tucked in there is how the ZX81 compares with other personal computers. So they've spec'd it out in their favour, of course, against what it considered to be the competition at the time, which is the Acorn Atom, the Apple II Plus, the PET 2001, the TRS-80 Level 1 and the TRS-80 Level 2. And we've got the price here actually, £70 for the basic, £120 with the 16K RAM pack, compared to an Apple II Plus, which was going to set you back £630. So that is why, not necessarily with this machine, it was with the ZX Spectrum that followed it that really exploded. That's why we had the bedroom coder boom in the UK. Not all thanks to, but in part thanks to Sir Clive Sinclair and his low cost British micros. So it's certainly a piece of history, two pieces of history here. And thank you very much, Matt and 2 Red 7s Limited for sending this in. This deserves an episode at some point. I'd love to get hold of a ZX80 as well so that we can do the two side by side and talk about those early Sinclair computer days. Andrew Dalton is the next donor, and in this box he segues us perfectly from the 1981 ZX81 to December 1981 and the machine that's in this box. Andrew, a friend of the channel who you'll have seen on the RMC live streams, a regular in Discord chat, and someone who's supported the channel for a long time. So thank you, Andrew, not just for this, but for all of the support that you've given the channel. And I'm going to let slip now the big secret. Andrew is in fact the voice of Alan Sugar in our Mega PC series, so what an impressionist. I'm sure you couldn't have told that that wasn't the real Alan Sugar.
Alright, treacle.
And here is the machine that you would have found in pretty much every school in the 1980s, every British school, that is. A little bit more yellow than I remember. It was always had a yellow tinge to it, but it's certainly yellowed. But I mean, look at the size of it compared to the ZX81. It's about a quarter of the size. Now, Sinclair accused the BBC of incompetence and arrogance in their choice of the BBC Micro, which wasn't the best idea because the BBC would then go on to publish a list of recommended computers for schools. Obviously, the BBC Micro was on that list, but also things like the Research Machines 380Z and other machines. But significantly, they left the Sinclair machines off that list, which meant schools wouldn't get a government subsidy to cover up to half the cost of the machine. This was the machine in schools. This was the machine that supported the computer literacy project. There was basically a decade of materials provided in multiple formats to teach people to code. Now, that doesn't mean we did it all in school. Many of us did do it at home with our low-cost Sinclairs, but this gave a huge amount of us a head start. And it's the machine that David Brabham and Ian Bell created the original Elite game on. So, yeah, a special machine, and well, you can tell that this is built with schools in mind. Because this wasn't just in upper schools, this was in primary schools as well. Kids as young as 5 or 6 were getting their first lessons in computing, so it was designed for sticky little children's fingers. It was designed to be bashed and knocked about, and these were sturdy machines. They really did survive a lot of punishment. The BBC Micro came in A and B variants. The B was really the one to go for. Both had a 6502 CPU. But the B had 32K of memory. The B Plus had 64 to 128K of memory, and then there was another model called the Master, which had 128K of memory as standard. And they're designed with expansion in mind. On the back, we've got the RGB port. I remember we used to have Cub branded monitors, and they had an industrial design and could be slapped about, much like the machine, and always survived very well in the classroom. while the machine did receive some quite good arcade ports, I want to say arcade rip-offs as well, it really was an educational machine. There was a huge library of educational software for it, but there are some real gems on the arcade front to be found, and of course Elite is the real killer app. And in many ways I consider this to be the first computer that I ever repaired. I will always remember a computer engineer in the classroom explaining to my teacher that he was going to have to take a BBC Micro away. It was probably going to cost them a lot of money. And then I slipped a small childlike hand around the back of the cub monitor, turned the brightness up, and the picture reappeared. I don't know what made me do it. It was probably me who turned it down in the morning. And I slipped around, turned it up. Oh, the look on that guy's face to have had that done in front of the teacher by a child to him. I'm not sure if he ever recovered from those burns. So to you, if you were a computer engineer in the 80s at schools and that happened to you, sir, I'm very, very sorry. The BBC Micro has a huge story to tell, but we're going to stop right there. I don't want to spoil any surprises for you. We'll make a whole series on this machine, maybe even a trash to treasure to bring it back to life and have it looking and operating like new. The donations from Andrew don't stop there though. Let's have a quick look at the next item that he also sent in with the BBC Micro. Let's fire through a couple more donations quickly then. This one again from Andrew Dalton, so thank you very much Andrew. We've just seen the BBC Micro. You may have heard of that, you probably have, but did you know in 1985 BBC also launched a games console? And here it is, a prime candidate for a tech nibble. The first time I've ever seen one of these. This would have set you back £199 in 1985, that's about £600 in today's money. And as you can see on the name here, you've got the well-known BBC logo under my finger there. Bridge, yes, this is a games console, but the only game it can play is Bridge, a game that I have no idea how to play. There were 9 cartridges available. I think we've got one in the box here. Let's have a look. Yes, we've got the big chunky power supply, lovely. We've got an RF cable, and there we go, there's one of the 9 cartridges. This one's called Bridge Builder. This cartridge will only work on the BBC Bridge machine. And on all of the items, although it's BBC branded, it says Unicard Limited. So that's obviously the company that produced it. I know what this looks like. This looks like part of a franking machine from the office. You'd weigh your post on it and print out your labels and pay for them rather than taking them down to the post office. That's what it looks like. Nothing like a games console from the period, that's for sure. The man behind the machine, behind programming it, was Andrew Cambits or Cambites. He was a maths teacher who turned programmer, and he became the director of the English Bridge Union. So he certainly knew what he was doing when it came to bridge. And I don't know if this teaches you how to play bridge or if it will just challenge you to bridge across its 9 cartridges. Maybe one of those 9s is a tutor. It would be a good challenge really, wouldn't it? Can this thing teach me how to play bridge, or can I at least learn how to play it well enough to take it on? And at £199, well, you'd think you could just buy a computer for that price and bridge software to go with it. Surely a £199 computer would have been more powerful than whatever's tucked away in here. There's only one way to find out, and we'll do that in a tech nibble soon. So thank you, Andrew. I don't think I've ever been interested in bridge, but you've piqued my curiosity now. Let me grab another box and we'll have another quick look at a donation. And this one is not a system, this is a box of games. This comes from Zara and Avril, who have drawn me a little picture with a smiley face, so thank you for your donation. Now this is off the back of the Dragon 32 Trash to Treasure that we did, and yes, it's a box of Dragon 32 games. Something I haven't seen a great deal of, to be honest, because even back in the day when the machine was on sale, we didn't see many Dragon 32 games on the shelves. It was all Sinclair ZX Spectrum games, it was Amstrad CPC games, it was Commodore 64 games, and then the later Atari and Amiga. That's what I remember. I'm not sure if I ever once remember seeing a Dragon 32 game on the shelves. But they come from an era when, shall we say, cover art, well, it was perhaps an afterthought. Let's look at some of these. Okay, spreading them out. Admittedly, I have seen worse, but there are some choice examples like this SAS game. Check that one out. That one's from Peaksoft. I'm guessing that's some kind of commando clone. Startling high-res action with helicopter gunships and minefields. There's nothing else there to tell us about the controls, so I don't know what type of game that is. We should do a live stream. We should plug the Dragon 32 in, because I don't have an SD card reader or anything like that for the Dragon 32, so I was just reliant on what few tapes I had when we demoed it. I really like this one, the Tiger Grand Prix. They've taken it quite literally and put a tiger in a crash helmet. Publisher Microdeal, who have this yellow strip along the bottom, they were probably the main publisher for the Dragon 32. There's a consistent kind of standard across their designs. They're not bad, actually. I think for the period, that's not bad. And we've got the King here by Microdeal. Clearly a Donkey Kong clone there. Wow, there's a lot of instructions for up periscope. You're a fleet commander. There's a lot to read to get the hang of that game, but that's okay. We'll set the Dragon 32 up, we'll play these games, we'll see how many work. We'll do a tape test, we'll see how many tapes work. So thank you, Zara and Avril. I feel like I'm about to get an education in Dragon 32 games, and I fully intend to share that experience with you all on Twitch. This next donation continues the British Micros theme, and it's a really interesting one. We saw the ZX81 earlier from 1981. That was followed by the ZX Spectrum. This was the big one. This was the one that sold in its millions and is really associated with the bedroom coding boom. It's a really iconic looking machine with its dead flesh keys, which was horrible, but it was a step up from those keys on the ZX81, which are just pressure sensitive. Anyway, I'm telling you this because the next computer is another Rick Dickinson design, and here it is. It is the Sinclair QL, or Quantum Leap, which of course was donated by Sam Beckett. What's that, Ziggy? Oh no, I bought this one myself. It was with the help of Carl on Instagram. He contacted me. He'd bought 3 of these from somebody who used to be a writer on Sinclair QL magazine, apparently, and he approached me and offered me this for £60, which is a really good price for the computer. So thank you, Carl, in giving me the opportunity to buy this from you. There's a sticker on here. It says, works for RMC, needs membrane, and that's typical of all Sinclair products. They all have a keyboard membrane under the keyboards, and at this age, they basically have just turned to dust, and they're very easily replaced. So that's not something that concerns me, and if that's the only problem, then we've got a great example. Now you look at this and you may think, oh, it's just another evolution of the ZX Spectrum, because we had the ZX Spectrum Plus in 1984, then we had the Plus 2 and the Plus 3, some examples of which we're going to see shortly. But this has nothing to do with the ZX Spectrum. This in 1984 came out for £399, and it was designed to run in parallel to the ZX Spectrum, because this was aimed at the business market. They wanted to recreate the home computer boom that we'd seen with the low-cost Sinclair Spectrum and the ZX81 in businesses. It was aimed at the IBM PC market, it was aimed at the Apple Macintosh market, or it would be, because the Apple Mac hadn't come out. This came out 1 month before the Apple Mac, and its release date wasn't the only thing that it beat it to. The research I've done so far tells me that this beat the Apple Mac by a month in releasing a home micro with an operating system with a GUI, the very first. And that operating system was also a preemptive multitasking operating system. Unlike the ZX Spectrum, this wasn't Z80 based. This had a Motorola 68008 CPU running at 7.5 MHz. That's a cut down version of the 68000 that would be found in the Apple Macintosh and the Amiga and the Atari and lots of other home micros. And it came with 128K of RAM, expandable up to 640K officially, although hackers have taken it up to 896K, which doesn't sound bad at all for 1984. That's a pretty good spec by my standards for £399, or at least it would be if perhaps Sinclair had given it another 6 months. This was not ready for market. It was full of bugs. And I think because it just needs a new membrane, let's peel that off actually, because it just needs a new membrane, we won't do a trash to treasure, we will clean it up, but I think this is worthy of a real history lesson. We can really get into the details of the history with this, have some fun with that micro drive, because it had a micro drive system instead of floppy disk, another interesting and perhaps very poor design choice from Sir Clive Sinclair, and we can learn all about this machine. So thank you, Carl, for the opportunity to play with this. I'm really looking forward to it. And as we've got all of the Sinclairs on the desk here, why not look at 2 more? These are 2 more donations. The Plus 2 was sent in by Matthew Franks, thank you Matthew, and the Plus 3 by Gregory O'Connell, as well as some Commodore 64 games that he sent in. Now, you'll notice the Plus 2 is pretty bashed. It's held together with an elastic band. The cassette doesn't stay down, it's missing a key. I think it can actually just lift off and open. Yeah, there we go. We can see inside. It's looking pretty dusty. We've got a very rusty RF shield there. So what will we do with this? It could be a trash to treasure. It could also be, you know, a donor. If we can get another one in a similar condition and we can fix, oh, there we go, fix that, job done, trash to treasure part 1. And we can get the replacement keys. There's a few burn marks and melted parts on the case here. Yeah, I think it deserves to be given some TLC. So we'll try and find some time to fix that one up and see if it's working. But the Plus 2 was from 1986 with its spring-loaded keys, and by this time, after the failure of the Sinclair QL, it was Amstrad who had bought the Sinclair computer range out. So these were actually produced by Amstrad despite having the Sinclair and the Spectrum name on them. And it was then in 1987 that the Plus 3 came along, which is essentially the same machine, albeit with a 3-inch disk drive. I really like the look of this. I don't know what they were thinking with the grey. I much prefer the black. And of course, no retro brighting. That's always a bonus. And it was the only Spectrum capable of running the CP/M OS without aftermarket add-ons because it had the disk drive built in there. So yeah, between the Spectrums, the BBC Micro, the BBC Bridge console, we've got a huge chunk of British micro history here to go through. So there's lots of episodes that we can come up, Trash to Treasures history episodes, a huge amount made possible by these donations and by the opportunity to buy the Sinclair QL. So thank you very much, guys. I will keep you in suspense no more as to what these are. 14 IBM NetVista desktop PCs. They weren't donated. I carried them all down into the cave, having found them on a classifieds ad app called Spock, and they were listed fairly locally to me. And well, have a guess how much I paid for these. I'll tell you what they are first. They're all Pentium 4s with the exception of one, which is a Pentium 3. They've got between 256 and 512 meg of RAM in them, and they've all got NVIDIA TNT2 graphics cards in them, or an OEM equivalent, which makes them perfect for the likes of a, let's say, a Quake 2 LAN party or other turn of the millennium era games. Now, if I'd seen these back in the day, I would have thought they were just sort of desk donkeys that belong in an office. But thinking back to that period, I had a tower PC, a gaming PC made of the flimsiest metal with a machine that I built myself. And what tended to happen was we would pilfer the parts, we would upgrade them. And a lot of those gaming PCs from that turn of the millennium era, they just don't exist anymore because we ripped them apart. So these are the options that exist for us now, and actually this is a pretty good option. The more I look at it, the more I like it. The price? £1.86 per machine, or £26.04 for an instant 14-person LAN party. Admittedly, I do need monitors, keyboards and mice to go with them, but I just couldn't turn it down at that price. So I'll give you a quick look inside one. It's a really nice, easy to open case. And what we've got in here is a Pentium 4. This is a 1.8 gigahertz Pentium 4, 256 megs of RAM, and this is a NVIDIA Riva TNT2 graphics card. There's also onboard network adapter, so we've got everything we need to go, really. The battery backup is with a coin cell battery, so no leak-to-vata battery in these. And despite being a desktop case, it's full height, so we can put full height PCI cards and AGP cards in there. And also a good PC on which we can test this. This was a donation from Steve Smith, so thank you, Steve. It's a sealed copy of PC-DOS for the IBM, an operating system which I've never used, so I think what better to break the seal and test this on than an IBM desktop PC. And I'm also interested to know what your ideas are. What would you do with 14 Pentium 4 desktop PCs other than heat a room and watch the electricity meter tick over? Leave some comments below and I'll be interested to see them. And finally, I think the last things we can squeeze into today's episode are some laptops, from desktops to laptops. Laptops all from a slightly different era. We've got the Macintosh PowerBook 160 here. This was sent in by Ralph Schumann, so thank you, Ralph. And then from Elliot Cole at the RetroFuture. Do check out Elliot's channel. It's a fantastic channel, mostly based around Game Boy restorations, but he does a lot more besides. So go and check out the RetroFuture. Elliot has sent in this IBM ThinkPad and a Sony Vaio. This is a Celeron-based Sony Vaio with Microsoft Windows 98 on. Given the choice of these three, when I was working in IT support, I would always have chosen the IBM ThinkPad. This is before the Lenovo days. These were solid, they were expensive, but they were solid, they were well supported, and I got on really well with them. At the opposite end of the scale was the Sony Vaio. This was the machine that the corporate execs would go out and get. They would go over the IT manager's head, despite the kit approval list with their company credit cards. They would come back with this and we would just hold our head in our hands, because as lovely as they are to look at, and I do confess they're nice looking machines even now, but they were lovely to look at in the era before the advent of Ultrabooks and things like that. These were really nice looking machines, but they broke quite easily. Here's the hinge off of one, just to prove that point, but thankfully the hinge has been kept hold of. And Sony's support was terrible. If you went to get the drivers off of Sony's website for this, let's say 6 months after it was released, half the time they wouldn't be there. It was an absolute nightmare. So if you lost your driver CD, you were in a lot of trouble. So for me, this was a case of style over substance, but Elliot's gone to the effort of sending it in to us, so I think I should probably dedicate some time to restoring it. I visit a lot of machines on this channel out of passion and memories, good memories of the machines I used to work with. This one, not quite such positive memories, so why not visit this and see if I can become a friend of the Sony Vaio. I'm skeptical, but it's worth a try. And if we turn our attention to the Macintosh PowerBook 160 here, we can immediately see a big crack on the screen there. So at the very least, a new screen will be needed for this, but otherwise it's in pretty good condition. Slightly rough feeling trackball, but I'm sure that can easily be sorted. And there's a selection of Macintosh-esque ports on the back, but I'm pleased to see that the power port over here is just a standard. That's a 7.5 volt, 2 amp power brick that it needs for this one, so that should be easy to source. If we can get a screen for this, then yeah, I'd really look forward to looking at what this machine can do. So that's just about as much as we can squeeze into the episode today. It's been a year since we did an episode like this, so there was far too much to squeeze into one episode. If you have donated something and it hasn't been on the episode today, I always make an effort to thank you personally on the platform you contact me through, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, however it is. I do always make the effort, and hopefully that's enough for you. If not, some of the items are still in the pile for the next time we do an episode like this. Some are earmarked for their own series. Items like the PC Engine CD-ROM system here, sent in by Chrissy. Thank you, Chrissy. This will get its own episode or indeed series. I think that deserves a trash to treasure. And to people like Kai, who sent in the SGI Octane, which you've seen, and other items that he sent in. A special thank you. Kai will be visiting me this weekend for a few beers, so it goes beyond just a thank you episode and showing the items. I have a lot more dialogue with the people who donate, so I'm very appreciative to you all. Thank you. And thank you to you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed what you saw today, and I'm looking forward to sharing more of it with you in future episodes. These donations are what makes the channel possible. This is what gives us content, and I appreciate it very much. Thank you guys, take care. See you next time.
If you enjoy my content and would like to toss a coin into the hat to support the cave, then check out patreon.com/retromancave and join the official cave dwellers you can see on the screen now. Thank you for your support.